Iran's strategic edge. 5 ways Iran gained the upper hand against Israel and the United States. In the early hours of February 28, 2026, the world woke up to a dangerous new reality. Missiles were flying. Drones were swarming across the skies of the Middle East. Air defense systems were lighting up the night like fireworks over cities that have seen too many wars already. The long-feared confrontation between Iran, Israel, and the United States had moved from the shadows into the open. For years, analysts warned that if these powers ever clashed directly, the consequences would ripple across the entire world, from energy markets to global politics, from military alliances to the future balance of power. Now that moment had arrived. But war is rarely simple. It is rarely just about who has the most advanced jets or the largest military budget. Sometimes victory, or at least strategic advantage, comes from something deeper: geography, patience, alliances, and the ability to reshape the battlefield in ways your opponent did not expect. In the opening phase of this conflict, many observers began to notice something surprising. Despite facing 2 of the most powerful militaries on Earth, Israel and the United States, Iran appeared to gain several strategic advantages, not necessarily a total victory, but important leverage. Leverage that could reshape the war. Leverage that could shift the calculations of governments far beyond the Middle East. In this analysis, we will explore 5 key ways Iran managed to gain the upper hand during the early phase of this confrontation. And to understand why these advantages matter, we must first understand the type of war Iran has prepared for over the past 2 decades. This is not a conventional war strategy. It is something far more complex. First advantage: the geography of power. One of Iran's greatest strengths has nothing to do with weapons. It has to do with geography. Iran is not a small state that can be easily surrounded or quickly defeated. It is one of the largest countries in the Middle East. Its mountains, deserts, and vast territory create a natural defensive fortress. Military planners have long understood that invading Iran would be extremely difficult. Unlike smaller countries that can be overwhelmed quickly, Iran has depth. Depth means that even if some military bases are destroyed, the country can absorb the shock and continue fighting. But geography gives Iran another advantage that may be even more important: control over one of the most critical choke points in the global economy, the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. Yet through this narrow corridor passes nearly 1/5 of the world's oil supply. Every day, massive tankers carry energy resources from Gulf countries to global markets, and Iran sits directly beside this vital route. During times of peace, this geography simply makes Iran an important regional player. But during war, it transforms Iran into something far more powerful: a gatekeeper. By threatening shipping routes, deploying naval mines, or launching drone attacks on vessels, Iran can disrupt global energy flows. And when energy flows are disrupted, the entire global economy feels the shock. Oil prices surge, stock markets react, governments panic. Suddenly, the war is no longer just about missiles and airstrikes. It becomes a global economic crisis. And in that sense, geography itself becomes a weapon. Second advantage: asymmetric warfare. Iran knows it cannot match the United States or Israel in conventional military technology. The United States possesses some of the most advanced aircraft, surveillance systems, and precision weapons in the world. Israel has one of the most sophisticated air defense systems ever built, so Iran did not try to copy them. Instead, Iran built a military strategy designed to exploit weaknesses in those systems. This strategy is known as asymmetric warfare. Rather than relying on a small number of extremely expensive weapons, Iran produces large numbers of cheaper systems: drones, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, swarming attacks. These weapons do not need to be perfect. They only need to be numerous. Here is the key strategic equation. An advanced missile defense interceptor used by Israel or the United States may cost hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, but a drone launched by Iran might cost only a fraction of that price. When dozens, or even hundreds, of drones are launched simultaneously, defenders face a dilemma. They must shoot down every single incoming threat. If even one gets through, it can cause damage to infrastructure, air bases, or military installations. Over time, this creates a financial and logistical imbalance. Iran can produce cheap weapons quickly, but intercepting them is expensive. This means the defending side may eventually face resource exhaustion. And that is precisely the battlefield Iran has prepared for. Not a quick war, but a grinding contest of endurance. Third advantage, the regional network. Another key component of Iran's strategy lies beyond its borders. Over many years, Iran developed relationships with various armed groups and political movements across the Middle East. This network is sometimes referred to by analysts as the axis of resistance. The concept is simple but powerful. If Iran itself is attacked, the conflict does not remain limited to one country. Instead, the battlefield expands. Different groups in different regions may launch their own operations, opening multiple fronts. Missiles from one direction, drone attacks from another, naval harassment in strategic waterways. Suddenly, the opposing military must divide its attention across a wide geographic area. This complicates military planning. It stretches resources. It forces adversaries to defend many locations at once. From a strategic perspective, this network acts as a force multiplier. Even if Iran's own military capabilities were limited, the existence of allied groups across several countries changes the nature of the conflict. It transforms a bilateral confrontation into a regional crisis. And when conflicts expand across regions, they become much harder to control. Fourth advantage, psychological warfare. Modern war is not fought only on battlefields. It is fought in the minds of populations. Public opinion, perception, fear, confidence. All of these factors shape the political decisions leaders must make. Iran has demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of psychological warfare. Mass missile launches, even when partially intercepted, create dramatic visuals. Images of air defense systems firing repeatedly into the sky, sirens echoing across cities, explosions lighting up the night. These scenes spread rapidly across social media and global news channels. The psychological impact can be significant. Civilian populations become anxious. Financial markets react to uncertainty. Political pressure increases on governments to end conflicts quickly. Even when physical damage is limited, the psychological impact may be enormous. Iran's strategy appears to recognize this. War is not just about destroying targets. It is about shaping perception. If a country can create the impression that it is capable of prolonged resistance, that it cannot easily be defeated, it may gain leverage in negotiations or diplomatic arenas. In this sense, perception itself becomes a battlefield. Fifth advantage, strategic patience. Perhaps Iran's greatest advantage is something less visible but deeply important: strategic patience. For more than 20 years, Iran has prepared for the possibility of a confrontation with stronger military powers. Instead of seeking immediate dominance, Iran invested in long-term capabilities: missile programs, drone development, underground facilities, distributed command structures, naval swarm tactics, all designed with a single objective: survival. If a nation can survive the opening phase of conflict against a stronger adversary, the strategic picture changes. Time becomes a factor. Costs increase. International pressure grows. Allies begin to question whether continued escalation is worth the risk. In other words, the longer the conflict continues, the more complicated the political landscape becomes. Iran's strategy appears built around this principle: endure the first strike, absorb the initial shock, then transform the conflict into a prolonged contest that becomes increasingly difficult for opponents to manage. The bigger global picture. But the consequences of this confrontation extend far beyond the Middle East. Global powers are watching carefully. Energy markets are reacting in real time. Shipping routes are being reassessed. Defense alliances are recalculating their strategies. A direct confrontation between Iran, Israel, and the United States is not just another regional conflict. It touches several critical elements of the global system: energy supply, strategic choke points, nuclear concerns, regional stability, and perhaps most importantly, the credibility of major powers. If one side appears unable to quickly control the situation, other countries may draw important lessons. Rivals study every detail. Military planners analyze every tactic. Governments observe how alliances respond. In many ways, wars like this reshape the future international order. What happens next? The future of this confrontation remains uncertain. Conflicts can escalate rapidly. They can also de-escalate through diplomacy, back-channel negotiations, or international pressure. History shows that many wars begin with dramatic openings but eventually move toward negotiated settlements. The key question is whether the current situation will follow that path, or whether it will expand further. Will additional countries become involved? Will global powers intervene diplomatically to prevent wider escalation? Or will the conflict deepen into something more dangerous? These are the questions policymakers are asking tonight. Final thoughts. War is often described as a contest of strength, but history repeatedly shows that strength alone does not determine outcomes. Strategy matters, geography matters, alliances matter, psychology matters, and patience matters. In the early phase of this confrontation, Iran appears to have leveraged these factors in ways that complicated the plans of its adversaries. Whether those advantages will translate into long-term success remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: the Middle East has entered a new and unpredictable chapter, and the world is watching very closely.